The sports you know and the players you love. This is the Kittitas Valley Sports Show with your host, Ryan Kuhn.
Welcome to the Kittitas Valley Sports Show. I am your host, Ryan Kuhn, and you're listening to the only local sports podcast that features everything from high school sports to Central Washington athletics to rodeo. Speaking of rodeo, we have a great debut show today that features a guest that everyone will know here in Kittitas Valley. He's well-versed in everything from rodeo to Central Washington University athletics to Kittitas fandom. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Guddat.
That's going to be some tough shoes to fill when you beat me up like that. So,
dude, you are the man. I mean, you've covered everything. You've covered rodeo. You've covered Kittitas. You've covered Central. What haven't you covered, Jon?
I would say this: when I first started covering everything, I had not a clue what I was doing, but it was just easy to get behind such a small community. And Ellensburg is definitely not a small community, but coming from, I hate to say this, coming from the west side, everything seemed to be smaller here, but I was just immediately taken by how just community oriented kind of the town shuts down to follow their kids and sports. And so and it's the same thing with rodeo. Obviously that's a little bit bigger scale, goes beyond Kittitas Valley, but it's been pretty fun to do the last, I guess it's been almost 20 years now.
Well, speaking of rodeo, you taught me everything I know about rodeo, and that's absolutely nothing. So, how'd you get into this love of rodeo?
Total accident. When I was graduating college, obviously before that I was applying for jobs. Knew I wanted to be a sports writer. Knew I wanted to do it in a small town, and applied at the Daily Record. I specifically remember the managing editor at the time asking me what I knew about rodeo, and kind of a blank stare, but and honestly I remember crashing and burning on that question in the interview. But if I wanted to be a sports editor here, I needed to know rodeo, and so I just kind of trial by fire, trial and error, and just again never competed myself, but just an absolutely amazing lifestyle and mentality toward taking care of your neighbor, taking care of your brother and friend. And so again, I've never competed, can't throw a rope to save my life. Horses can smell the fear in me or something, but I just love watching people do what they do and practice, and it's their livelihood, it's their hobby, it's their sport. But if they don't make any money, then it's hard for them to pay the bills, and to me that's just kind of an amazing setup to be able to cover and watch.
Hey, at least they asked you, do you know anything about rodeo? I mean, when I got my interview, Joanna didn't even mention rodeo. They're like, oh, we have a rodeo in town and a big fair. I get here, and you have to cover rodeo. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Well, I'm glad that I'm still an option. I'd love to do it, and I'll just do it until you, sir, tell me you don't need me anymore.
No, I always need you. You know that. What's your favorite memory of cover rodeo?
Favorite memory of cover?
Yeah, favorite memory.
There's a handful of them. I've kind of discussed it a few times before in terms of my very first Ellensburg rodeo that I covered was Labor Day weekend, the year 2000, and I had not a clue what I was doing, and it showed in my writing. And but I was just awestruck by the sport. I didn't know how to cover it. I didn't know how to explain it, and I'm repeating myself. It showed in my writing, but there was a nice before the Western Village was built. I can't really remember what it looked like before the Western Village was built, but before that was built, there was just a nice, probably 4-foot tall lady who was in charge of day sheets and press passes and everything like that. Miss Morrison, you can say, and she read me the riot act. It was very sweet about doing it, broke me down and built me back up, but basically said my coverage was lacking. She did it in the sweetest voices that you could hear, But it was just one of those things where I learned if I was going to cover rodeo or if I was going to survive covering rodeo, that I better know what I'm doing. And so what that taught me was just ask tons of questions, ask the stupid questions. Don't be afraid to ask those stupid questions. And hopefully, I think that I've generated a little bit of respect just because I just ask and I have an appreciation for it. And so that's probably one of my first memories. But to be quite honest with you, I mean, there's just so many. I can still remember B.J. Schumacher winning the prototype. It wasn't called Extreme Bulls then. I think it was called Championship Bull Riding when Ellensburg did a prototype before Extreme Bulls, and I can remember B.J. Schumacher being bucked off at 8.01 seconds, but he made that 8-second whistle, and that prompted him or propelled him to his eventual NFR qualification. I remember that he was the only one that rode in the short round, and that was in 2002. I can remember my first NFR in 2005, and just an amazing time. I can remember my second NFR, my first NFR in 2008, first NFR with my wife, going down there. Just fun to be able to share that. I can remember my kids being behind the chutes at multiple rodeos. So you asked me a very simple question, I give you a long, windy road of an answer, but too many stories to try to fit into a podcast. But there's just so many good memories of rodeo, be it a great ride, a great roping round, or just sharing it with friends.
Well, what I like about this too is, you've involved your family, you've involved your wife, you involved your 2 daughters. I bet they know more about rodeo than most kids at their age. I mean,
I would say maybe, yeah. I would definitely, from a fan perspective, I do think that they're pretty darn familiar with rodeo. I think the only kids that would know rodeo more than them are the kids that are in the back of the trailer with their dads and moms who compete, and or the weekend warriors that compete. And so my kids are similar to me. They don't throw ropes, they don't ride barrels or anything like that, but they love being in the arena. They love traveling with me to different arenas. They'll remember certain aspects about rodeos that we go to, and so from a you always want to be safe as a parent. You always want to be safe with your kids, but the rodeo arena, I would say, is one of those few places where, as my kids were really young, I knew that they were going to be okay without a little bit of supervision, because they knew to stay out of people's way. They knew to stay out of respect the space of an animal and stuff like that. And so I was always comfortable with them being around the arena or exploring things on their own.
Well, what I like too, I mean, when I have a kid or something, I'm gonna love that he knows so much about baseball, and my passion about baseball is handed down. I mean, that has to feel good as a father to these girls have embraced your passion. And
yeah, the only fault I have with your scenario there is you're talking about the Angels, and I have a problem with that. But we can argue about that later.
Yes, everyone. I am an Angels fan. I grew up in Southern California. I'm sorry. What can I say? 2002 was a great year. My dad took me out of school to go to the championship parade, and I will never forget that. So, yes, I am an Angels fan. I'm sorry, everyone. Final question: would you ever get on a horse? Come on.
I will ride very sporadically. You asked me about like favorite memory or favorite story about rodeo. I have a favorite story about riding horse. I did a story years ago on cowboy mounted shooting, and I wanted to get on a horse and I wanted to try mounted shooting, and they put me on a horse named Dudley, and Dudley was about as fast as his name would indicate. But he was a very trusty, experienced old horse who was very comfortable with me, and so that made me comfortable with him. So I don't ride very much at all, but when I do ride, I truly enjoy it. And Dudley was the last time that I rode, if I can remember correctly, and Dudley took good care of me. I can't shoot worth a dang. I can shoot as good as I can rope, and I wouldn't bet on either one of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Guddat. He is our rodeo correspondent here at the Daily Record. He will be out and about his favorite weekend of the year, August 31st to September 3rd, Labor Day weekend. Thank you so much. We will be back after these messages, and we're going to get into some CW athletics. I know you love the Wildcats.
Definitely. Can't wait.